Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone joining us today from across the country and around the world. I'm Michael Higgs, Program Specialist here at Conscious Capitalism. On behalf of the entire CCI team, we appreciate you taking time to learn and grow in community with us today. Today, we're joined by Tammira Philippe and Tamla Wilson of Bridgeway Capital Management to discuss looking at business through a lens and how it's possible to balance profit and purpose. As many of you know, conscious capitalism is a philosophy that emphasizes the human nature of business as a movement of business leaders from around the world working to change the practice and perception of capitalism as a means to elevate humanity. Conscious Capitalism is a nonprofit organization dedicated to catalyzing that movement by creating learning opportunities like today's session and building systems of support for practicing conscious capitalists throughout our senior leader network membership. Several times a month, we're offering these virtual gatherings as a way for the community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and business practices of those in our network. Today's gathering will run for about 45 minutes. Tammira and Tamla will be in conversation for about 30 minutes, and then we'll transition to audience questions for the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try to get to as many of your questions as possible during our time together. If you have any technical questions or issues, please email us at info@consciouscapitalism.org. And it is now my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. Today, we are excited to be joined by Tammira Philippe, President and CEO of Bridgeway Capital Management, an investment management firm that stewards over $5 billion in quantitative public equity strategies for clients. We're also joined by Tamla Wilson, Director of Investor Relations at Bridgeway. We are so excited for both of you to join our discussion today, and a warm welcome to you both.
Thank you. I'm Tamla Wilson, a partner at Bridgeway Capital Management. And when I joined Bridgeway almost 10 years ago, I was a seminarian following my higher calling with a focus on serving those who were marginalized. Now I get to work every day in my higher purpose by combining my call to serve as an ordained minister with my professional skills as an investment relationship leader because of Bridgeway's commitment to relational investing and conscious capitalism. I'm joined today by Bridgeway's President and CEO, Tammira Philippe, my friend, for a conversation about how we put strategy into action in line with the tenets of conscious capitalism. For almost 3 decades, Bridgeway has been doing this, and we'll talk about our successes, but also some of our struggles that we've had along the way. Tammira is a believer that principles are the foundation of prosperity, and that culture eats strategy for breakfast. A former McKinsey consultant and CEO of Bridgeway, she's a passionate, energetic leader so putting strategy into action for her is just definitely part of her wheelhouse. And before we dive in, I do want to point out that Tammira published an article this morning on LinkedIn. She's a busy lady. And so you can use that as a reference for the conversation we're having today. So Tammira, I'm excited because we have these kind of conversations all the time, but what excites me is that others are going to get to hear your wisdom and your perspective. So first, what do you think is important for everyone to know about conscious capitalism and how we implement it at Bridgeway? And to those who may not be familiar, why do you think this approach is appropriate today?
Great. I'll definitely address that, Tammy. But before I dive into that, I just want to say how excited I am to be here today. Like you said, I feel like we're taking a conversation that you and I typically have on airplanes or in Lyft cars on the way to meetings about how we can do a better job of combining profit and purpose. And just very excited to share our story with other people because we can do that together. And then also, you're going to share some of your wisdom too. So I know we talked about that in advance because, one of the great things that I've been able to do in my career at Bridgeway, I like to think I pulled you out of retirement like one of the great NBA stars and said, hey, you can achieve your higher purpose in a for-profit business. And let me tell you how. And I'm so glad you said yes. And, that's led us to the conversation today. So, I think that's a great intro to how we think about conscious capitalism and, really, how this whole community that we're now a part of thinks about it, which is that conscious capitalism is about businesses elevating humanity and looking at that by ascribing to 4 key tenets: higher purpose, stakeholder orientation, conscious leadership, and conscious culture. And I'm so excited that I've been able to do that for almost 17 years at Bridgeway. And then, bringing that to today, over that 17 years that I've been here, I, of course, was personally passionate about that and the challenge of, can you really build a for-profit business this way? And frankly, there were some skeptics when I first was talking about joining this business 17 years ago. But there are fewer skeptics today. And I think people in general have realized that this false choice that they've been fed, that you can either strive for business results or strive for her higher purpose, is really just that. It's a false choice. We can do both in every business. It's not easy. We have to think differently. We have to approach things through what I call, and many like to call, systems thinking, and look in an integrated way at problems, at how can we satisfy the needs and the aspirations of all stakeholders by our actions, rather than making trade-offs between one or the other. But that's definitely what we are striving to do at Bridgeway. And I hope together, Tammy, we can share more of our story to motivate and encourage, because we all get discouraged sometimes about the challenges that we're facing. So that's my initial thoughts on your question.
So yeah, I like that the integration piece that you shared, because to me, that's a lot of how I show at Bridgeway. I get to be integrated. I don't have to be a minister outside of Bridgeway. I bring all of who I am into Bridgeway, and all of our partners do. And it makes it a lot of fun for everybody, because you get to know the full person and not just this one part of someone. So can you say a little bit more about how this applies at Bridgeway specifically, and investment management?
Yes, and when you commented on the fun, I will say that fun is in our mission statement at Bridgeway, and it's one of the things that attracted me. And I was talking about people have realized that they don't need to make this false choice, but I'll just say from personal experience, it's just a lot more fun and rewarding. When we can strive for both a higher purpose and a profit, and really achieve both of those at the same time. And I know that that's what has definitely retained me over the long run, and attracted and retained this incredibly diverse team that you and I get to be a part of. Just one little tidbit for those who don't know all the details about Bridgeway, and I'll go into answering your question, Tammy, about how we apply this in investment management and financial services. But at Bridgeway, the team that we've built over the years, 67% of our professionals, our entire team, identify as a woman or a person of color, or both. And those are some extraordinary results for humanity, I like to think, that we've achieved in an industry that has statistics that are, at best half of that in terms of just overall representation. And we measure diversity in multiple ways. We think about cognitive diversity and identity diversity, to simplify it down. And I just gave you an identity diversity stat, but we do think about that holistically. And it's a very important way that we think about being a great investment manager. So with that, Tammy, I think I'll come back to your question of how do we think about this in the particular business that we're in? So we manage money, that was mentioned in the intro, and we think about being leaders in relational investing. And that's the idea that we can combine results for investors, which we approach through a very disciplined, statistical, evidence-based approach that we've been doing since 1993, by looking at relationships in data and how we can identify markers of companies from their financial statements and their market prices, and that we can see those relationships and have an advantage in a very competitive field to deliver great outcomes for clients. On the Returns for Humanity side, we do that in a variety of ways. The most prominent and I would say, I guess, provocative way that we've done that since the beginning is that we're committed to donating 50% of what we earn from providing great service to clients to making a positive impact in the world. And so that's our unique approach to thinking about how do you combine results for investors and returns for humanity and in this relational investing approach. And that has allowed us to stand out in a very competitive field over a very long time.
Yes. So I'm just curious, as you talk to other CEOs, investors, and their advisors, it seems like there's really this increased expectation of businesses in general, and specifically to us as investors in public companies globally. Can you talk about what you've heard from others and what you think is most important to remember?
Yes, I'll share, and I hope you'll remember to share a little bit from your experience too after I give a couple of comments, Tammy. But we definitely see it in the work that I just talked about in our efforts to scan the globe of public companies and invest with discipline and conviction. That public companies globally are being held to a much higher standard today. The most obvious example of that is the growing interest for more action and disclosure from companies on what are they doing on what everybody refers to as DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. What are their metrics and what are their efforts to improve those metrics? And what are companies doing on another favorite acronym these days is ESG. What are you doing on environmental, social, and governance issues? So there's just huge interest, demand, higher standards among investors for public companies and private companies to do a better job and also communicate better about what we're doing on those topics. So I see that. I also have the pleasure and privilege to serve on the advisory council of the Stanford Business School. And I hear that from my peers on the advisory council and the work that, for example, that the Business Roundtable has done over the last several years to restate what the purpose of a corporation is, and that it's profit, but it's also thinking about the impact on all the stakeholders in an integrated way. One of my, I love data, Tammy, as you know, and one of the data elements that I most like to follow, and I've heard many people talk about this, but I like to share it every time I get a chance, is this Edelman Trust Survey that's done globally. They've been doing it for 21 years, or I think 22, sorry. This most recent one was done in 28 countries with 36,000 respondents. And one of the things that stands out, that confirms what I think most of us are seeing out in the world and in the media and in the press, is that from that most recent survey, and we've been seeing this over time, they're asking people globally, like, who do you trust the most? And they break down institutions into businesses, non-governmental organizations, the government, and media. And among those, business, it's just shocking to me sometimes, given all the skepticism about, our character in business, but business among those institutions is the most trusted at this moment in time. So more, and by their standards, the only trusted one, the others are like more neutral. So business is the most trusted. But, and this dismayed me, but I think we can do better, and this is what we're all working towards. 52% of those respondents, even though they said business is the institution they trust the most, 52% of the respondents said that business overall does more harm than good for society. So clearly we have some things we can do better, and there's a lot of room for improvement. But I love that data, and I think that is the most prominent thing, Tammy, that stands out to me, that I'm hearing and seeing about the higher standards and the expectations for those of us who are building and leading businesses.
Yeah, the Edelman Trust is...
Share a little bit more about what you're seeing.
Well, I was just going to say the Edelman Trust Survey is fascinating to me. It touches on an area that's really a differentiator for Bridgeway. And I know this to be true because you and I have sat in a room in a finals presentation where, that was the focus. Like everybody made it to the room because of our strategies and our technical ability. But what really sold them on Bridgeway was the fact that they trusted us, that they looked at our culture, and so I think that is really a differentiator. And I would love to hear more about what you can tell us about financial services and how you're applying these ideas as a conscious leader within Bridgeway.
Yes, and this is where, I mean, I think there are opportunities for businesses across all the sectors. When you look at that trust survey, the trust levels could go much, much higher for every sector. But sadly, the sector that we're in, financial services, has been the least trusted over the last 10 years. So they rank the sectors, technology is at the top, consumer goods, all that. And financial services comes in last and has come in last for the last 10 years. Now we have, as a collective, improved over that 10-year period. So that's some good news. Moving some things in the right direction, which is what we all need to strive for. I mean, we got to start somewhere, and we just move forward from where we are. But it just strikes me that I just think as an individual, as a human being, I don't know that anybody thinks like basically, I think everybody thinks trust with your money is the most important thing. And so to have the people dealing with our money, be the least trusted is just ridiculous. And we have to do better. I wanted to share, Tammy, we've talked about this. I have simplified my own formula for how I like to think about trust. And I've picked it up and integrated it from a variety of people over the years. So I think about breaking down trust into character. Your heart has to be in the right place and you have to take action in line with that. I think about credibility or capability and that's that, look, I mean, in our example, you have to believe that we're actually skilled at managing money. Like we have to have expertise in the area that you're trusting us in. You don't need to trust me with your kids, but you do need to trust me with your money. Right? So capability is super important. You might trust somebody with one aspect of your life, but not another because their capability isn't proven to you in that area. And the third is communication. And that's the area that I think applies comprehensively across all organizations, and I think is so crucial to the conscious leadership element of the four tenets of conscious capitalism is how are we doing on communication? Are we being authentic? Are we being clear? Are we actually reaching our audience, whoever they may be, whatever stakeholder they are, where they are, and communicating in a way that they understand what we're saying and what we're doing? And so that's my formula for trust. I think we all need to work on that. The Edelman Trust Survey is obviously pointing that out to us as businesses. So we need to work on character, and we need to work on capability, and we need to work on communication.
Yeah, I've been fortunate at being a minister that I usually get the trust part. I do want to say before I ask the next question though, that I do trust you with my kids, Tammira. So, but anyway, tying this back to conscious capitalism, higher purpose is one of the key tenets. What have you learned about this at Bridgeway and beyond that you think is most helpful?
Yes, and I want to talk about that, but I just remembered one thing, Tammy. I'm such a geek. The data in that Edelman Trust Survey, back to what are people expecting of businesses? They're looking to leaders. So talking about conscious leadership, 81% of the respondents in that survey said they expect that CEOs need to do a better job of communicating what their companies are doing to have a positive impact on stakeholders beyond making a profit. So what is your company doing to benefit society? How are you working on workforce reskilling? How are you working to address economic inequality and climate change? So that's just an example of taking it back to the conscious leadership part of where we're striving for conscious capitalism, is that leaders are expected to communicate around these issues and to take action, and not just say, hey, we like this, but what are the actions that we're taking on these issues? So higher purpose. I think it would be great, Tammy, if you talked about this a little bit in the intro, but why don't you kick us off a little bit about higher purpose and how you're thinking about that and how that shows up at Bridgeway, and then I'll add on.
So for me, it shows up in, I get to work somewhere where I contribute to people's, retirement plans. I focus on institutional investors and, the folks that are board members or stewards for these members. And I get to help them come up with a positive result for their membership. And at the same time, they get to work with us with what we do towards, 50% of our earnings going to charity and the work that we do through our Bridgeway Foundation, among other things. I believe that, many of the clients that we serve are very intrigued about contributing to transformative change in the world at the same time as getting positive results for their members. And then selfishly, I also get to still be in ministry and serve where I feel like I'm called as, personally. So that's what I find really rewarding about, the higher purpose. And I'm one of many at Bridgeway, so I'm not a unicorn. There are several ministers, but also many people who are very active in their own personal transformative change activities beyond what the firm does. So it's just, I see that we're all aligned there.
Yeah, so Tammy, you touched on, I think the some key elements of what we've learned over 3 decades at Bridgeway, right? So we were founded very clearly around a higher purpose that really unifies our entire team. And what we've also learned, I talked about the diversity of the team that we've been able to attract, which was a core value of ours from the beginning. And we've been very intentional about attracting a diverse team. When you attract a diverse team, we have to, when we think about higher purpose can be a very personal thing. So we've had to really focus on how do we have a higher purpose that unifies our team while still leaving enough flexibility for these individualized passions or core beliefs about what an individual's higher purpose is and how they can express that inside of a broad framework that we establish as an organization. So to go a little bit deeper about higher purpose and what I've done as a leader, what we've done collectively as an organization is that and I think a lot of the businesses I've been exposed to have thought about it this way, and we need to think about part of our higher purpose needs to really emanate from the core product and service that we're offering to people. There needs to be a higher purpose to that that's beyond, hey, I can make money at this. So in our specific case, I know that when I was joining Bridgeway, and I see this when we're talking to candidates about joining, and I believe we've been able to achieve this, I wanted to put my head on the pillow at night, believing that the core service, in our case, investment management, was going to improve lives. Like it was really going to make a difference for people. And I believe we've been able to achieve that. And we put that first. You mentioned stewardship. One of the ways that we think about stewardship at Bridgeway, we talk a lot more about stewardship than ownership. And we really try to cultivate that, which is having the passion and the discipline to care for an asset for the benefit of others. The interesting thing about that is who are the others, right? The others, of course, are our clients. But for many of our people, the way that becomes very personal is they see their family background in the clients that we serve, for example. And they also see that because we're striving for profit and purpose, that if we do a great job for clients, then those profits come to us. And everyone who works at Bridgeway is also an owner. Every single person who is a long-term staff member is also an owner. So if we generate great outcomes for clients, then we earn profits and we share in those rewards as individuals. And then the others that we're stewarding these assets for, in addition to clients, are our families, our communities. We've attracted a very generous set of professionals at Bridgeway who give back, not just while Bridgeway is giving back by working hard every day, but of their own personal time and money. So those are ways, so we unify around offering a core product and service that we think is improving lives. And beyond that, and this is what I was so excited about when I joined, and I'm still excited about 17 years later, is that it's like I come to work every day and I'm striving to help clients reach their dreams. And then in addition, like way beyond that, every profit dollar that we earn, we donate and give back. And then we have some of the foremost experts in the world that we've partnered with in the Bridgeway Foundation who are trying to solve some of the most tragic and tough problems on the planet and are fully dedicated to doing that with their time. So it's been very exciting for me personally to make that higher purpose real at Bridgeway. And Tammy, I know it has been for you, and that's what we're striving for every day, is to have each person at Bridgeway, one of our key stakeholders, feel that every day, that they are living their higher purpose.
Yeah, I didn't think there was a place like Bridgeway before I came to Bridgeway. So, and I wanted to touch on another thing just briefly that you mentioned when you talked about our colleagues at Bridgeway. We were very intentional in our hiring process, and what that has resulted in is a bond that is very real between all of our colleagues. And when you think about, how everyone shows up for one another. When I was ordained, I was new to Bridgeway, and I looked out into the congregation, and more Bridgeway people were there than my family and friends. And we have a colleague who experienced the same thing at the recent loss of a parent. And so I just feel like the intentionality that we've had around building what we've built shows up in so many different ways. One of the things that is part of our higher purpose at Bridgeway is about fostering prosperity, which you touched on a little bit. Can you share a little bit more about how you think about that for Bridgeway and beyond?
For sure. So for us and for me personally, prosperity is more than financial success. Prosperity is about the success that we achieve when we follow principles, which we try to do in everything we do, including how we invest. And we strive for our highest aspirations for ourselves and for our community, which includes, all of the different stakeholders that we talked about. We, like I said before, we want people to feel like they're doing their life's work at Bridgeway. And the reason we do that is because we've seen it firsthand, that when someone comes to work every day, and feels like what they do really matters, they go above and beyond in ways that we could never define. I mean, they figure it out because they have a higher purpose, and they're gonna, kind of figure out that when that client called at 5:00 and, they needed something that, normally would not be expected of a company like us to be able to provide, they go the extra mile to try to get that to the client because they're trying to help that client realize their dreams. And that's just one example that I've seen play out over and over. And, those are the types of things that we're striving for, that we can't actually prescript. All we can do is embed this feeling of commitment in our people and among our people. And you talked about, Tammy, our hiring process. We start that idea from the very beginning. I think we've mentioned that at Bridgeway, we do have a different name for how we refer to all staff members, and that's intentional. And, some people are, definitely candid that maybe we're not measuring up sometimes, but we're striving to really have a different relationship with our team members, with our colleagues, than the traditional employee relationship. And one of the ways we do that is we try not to use the word employee, because we don't want people to feel like an employee like they might have felt in a different organization. We want them to feel like a partner. And one of our definitions of partners is a commitment between colleagues, and a different kind of commitment. And all we do is put that out there from the very beginning before someone joins Bridgeway, and continue to put that out there through regular conversations as, hey, how can we have a different kind of commitment to each other than what you've had in other organizations? How can we show up that way? And then people do. People show up, like you said, in extraordinary ways that we could never prescribe.
Right. Yeah, I think another tenet, which we're kind of touching on, so we may as well go ahead and dive in, is the stakeholder orientation. So do you want to say a little bit more? I mean, you've already kind of gone there, so let's just go all the way.
Yeah. So we have simplified our communication around stakeholder orientation at Bridgeway to clients, colleagues, communities. And we talk about having an extraordinary commitment to all three of those stakeholders. One obvious thing that people have commented on that is not in that short and brief stakeholder map that we have is, well, what about owners? What about, you're a for-profit company? And what's interesting for Bridgeway in our design, which again, it doesn't, we don't have the one formula that works for every business, but this formula is working for ours, is that in our business, people are looking for longevity and stability. We talk about building a firm that can be around private and independent into perpetuity, which gives an investor who needs to have a time horizon that, frankly, in the equity, like stock portfolios that we build, needs to be a decade long. We say the best equity investors think in decades, not days. So they need somebody who's going to manage those portfolios for them, us, to be around and be stable and have that team that's committed for a long time. So what we do is that everyone inside of Bridgeway, and we think of the collective team, that everybody at work who works at Bridgeway, not just the investment professionals who are managing the portfolios, but everybody who works at Bridgeway has an opportunity to contribute to the outcomes that our clients are getting. And so everybody at Bridgeway participates in the ownership of the firm, and the profits that we are able to generate are shared through that ownership, those ownership programs. And so that's just one example of how we think about stakeholders differently than maybe some people do, and that has really worked for us. The other thing I wanted to comment on is related to this, Tammy, is that as we've internalized the tenets of conscious capitalism, when we think about stakeholders, the most important difference for, I would say, true capitalism or conscious capitalism that, capitalism got off track on at some point during its history is that you're not trading off between stakeholders. Like if you spend all your time thinking about trade-offs between stakeholders, that's all you'll ever see. We spend all of our time thinking about how can all stakeholders win at the same time. And I'll just give a simple example that you've seen at Bridgeway, Tammy, and you've even actually implemented this recently. We have a flexible PTO and a sabbatical program. And at first people are like, oh gosh, how could that really work in a small business in a for-profit setting? But we see that as one of the ways where we're simultaneously benefiting all our stakeholders. So why do our clients benefit from that, which are the stakeholder that we honestly put first as a fiduciary? Our clients benefit because, as I was talking about, they need to know that our team can survive and thrive and continue to deliver the service that they're expecting, even if one team member is out or multiple team members are out. And so one of the things that our flexible PTO and sabbatical programs do is make sure that we have that depth in our team and the training that is needed to be able to deliver our service under a wide variety of conditions. At the same time, our people benefit when they take that time off in the obvious ways that I think people know, where they come back with a new perspective, often from a sabbatical, with new ideas and just different things that they might have dedicated their time to studying over that sabbatical time. And then thirdly, the communities. Why do they benefit from our flexible PTO and sabbatical programs? This is what gets interesting when you bring together the kind of people that we've been bringing together committed to our higher purposes. Many of the people, when they take their sabbatical, or frankly, sometimes some people see this as PTO, they're out there serving their communities. They're using that time, sometimes with their families, to go on trips where they actually are getting involved in giving back to the community in a way that they're not able to do during a normal work week. And so in that way, we've seen in implementing that program, a very specific program, a way that we're benefiting all stakeholders simultaneously. And I just wanted to give that one rich example of how to think about benefiting all stakeholders simultaneously and not making trade-offs.
Well, that was great. I did especially enjoy my sabbatical. So yes, I think it's a definite benefit of working at Bridgeway. I think we've actually come close to the time. So I didn't know if Michael wanted to pop back on. Hey, there he is.
Hello. Well, thank you so much for an engaging and rich conversation thus far. This is just a reminder for our attendees. If you do have any questions for Tammira or Tammy, please put those into the Q&A. We do have a number of questions ready to go. So I'm going to start with a question from Tony Johnson. And I'm going to expand her question a little bit. And she asks, what sort of government or regulatory changes might be needed to further support this way of doing business?
What a great one. I am by no means an expert in it, but as a former McKinsey consultant, I'll talk about anything and give you my opinion.
But let me say, I think if that's Tony Johnson, that I think it's a he, and he's actually a consultant, I think.
Okay. My apologies, Tony.
That's okay.
Thank you, Tammy, for the clarification.
Yeah, well, I mean, my short, honest answer, but this is why we wanted to do this. Tammy and I both, is like, we learn every day, and we want to open this conversation up and continue it, because we have a long ways to go. I mean, we've done some things, but we've got high aspirations, and we need to keep going. But I think actually we've come a long way. There are a lot of things in place. The B Corporation movement and that capability to register yourself as a B Corporation, so that you have the flexibility to think about things, again, in my opinion, the way a true capitalist would think about it. But somewhere we got off track. But also, I mean, for public companies, there are collective organizations that are working on that allow public companies to be reinforced and, from a legalistic point of view, be protected from thinking about stakeholders simultaneously, that thinking about all stakeholders simultaneously is beneficial to shareholders. So I'll just stop there, because again, it's not my area of expertise, and there are a lot of people who know tons more about this than I do, but I hope that's somewhat helpful. And Tammy, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, I was just going to say, the more that we embrace the sustainable development goals on that level, that we may see, that might be helpful, at least. A lot of us are doing that willingly, but if there was a little bit more of a government embracing of those concepts and ideas, that might help.
Wonderful. So our next question, Tamara, I think this is going to appeal to your passion for data, but Eric Moss asks, what analysis has Bridgeway done to accept or reject the hypothesis that conscious business makes a difference to investors? And this would be sort of aligned to in the work of Raj Sisodia and the firms of endearment.
Yeah. So gosh, you're speaking to one of our favorite topics, and I'll try not to go on and on with our limited time, but I'd love, to talk about it further. We can definitely take this offline. But let me say the simplest answer I know. So as of today, Bridgeway, in our investment portfolios, we are super quantitative, super data-driven. We're competing and managing money in very volatile and dynamic equity markets. So we need decades of data. One of the challenges with data around conscious business and things is that, frankly, there's just, we can never have enough data, but there hasn't been enough data. Every year that passes, it gets better and better. Where we've arrived individually as a company, and there are other organizations that, have had bigger budgets for research and done different things and come to different conclusions, frankly. But where we've arrived is in our investment portfolios. Of course, primarily we're looking at financial statements, and we do think these outcomes show up in financial statements, right? So we can just look at normal financial metrics. And if we're, going for companies that are valued fairly or even inexpensively, and companies that are quality companies that have strong financial metrics, which are some of the things that we look at in our investment portfolios, then of course we're going to pick up the conscious businesses that have translated these things into business results. In addition, on these metrics of E, S, and G, which I don't want to get too wonky about, but we have a data set that we use to look at ESG, and we've done the analysis over as long as that data set exists. And what we've, at least at this moment in time, and it's like forever research, we never stop researching, what we've identified is that that's definitely a risk factor. So that companies that are doing a really bad job in the extremes on these things tend to, that risk, if you will, doesn't get rewarded. So you're taking more risk by investing in what I'll label the bad actors, and you're not getting rewarded for taking that risk. So we in our view of ESG integration, which I'm getting real investment specific, we do look at that. We look at some data for that, and we make sure that we're not taking that risk that is not going to be rewarded. So I'll stop there and say, let's keep this conversation going if you want to hear more about what we've done personally. We've also, by the way, not in our investment portfolios, but we've studied that firms of endearment data set and kind of done some analysis and written a couple of things about that too in the past. We haven't, so I can take that offline too and share with you about it. But we're very excited about the coming years and the coming decades with more disclosure and more outcomes to be able to incorporate even more of this into how we invest.
Wonderful, thank you. I want to jump to two questions that we have regarding purpose, and I'll do my best to sort of roll them into one question. Bernard asks, he says, it's clear to me you implement your purpose internally through conscious culture and conscious leadership. But how do you implement your purpose in what you do as part of your core business? And I want to actually, as an addendum, add a second question from Michelle, who had read your LinkedIn article. And she says, you state in that article that your higher purpose is a world without genocide. And that seems like an incredibly high bar to set. And if you could just, speak to that, Bernard's question about your purpose and its implementation in your core business, as well as maybe open it up a bit to your higher purpose as an organization.
Sure, and I'm watching the time. Brevity is not my strength. I'm sure y'all have already picked that up. But so I'll take the two parts. So on the first part, the higher purpose in our core business. So what I would say there is, businesses are meant to elevate humanity, right? Is part of the movement that we've been focused on. And what we believe is that, in serving our clients and trying to generate the best investment outcomes that we can for them, we're allowing those clients to have peace of mind, right? And financial security. And that alone is a huge contribution to humanity. Is because money and financial security is a huge worry for most people in the population. The other thing that we've seen is that as we free people up from that, they do extraordinary things in the world. And so in both of those ways, without doing anything specific in the types of companies we invest, we believe that we're elevating humanity in our core product and service. The other thing I've seen just by studying ourselves and studying other businesses striving for this is we can never stop striving. Most companies in their core product and service have an evolution over time where they keep thinking hard about, okay, what more can we do? What more can we do to make sure that the core product and the core service that we're offering, continues to elevate humanity? My favorite thing is from the book, the Conscious Capitalism book, where, they talked about, they were really into healthy eating, right? But, they couldn't just carry like healthy foods on the shelves in the beginning. I mean, they had to reach a point because customers could choose. But what they were always striving for is to get the customers to choose to only have, the healthiest products. And they did a lot of education over time. So I would just say it's a journey. We can do more in our core product and service. We're striving to do that. But at its core, I just described a little bit here and in the prior question, what we are doing and how we think about it. On the second question, which was about a world without genocide being, extraordinary, we're like, yeah, but like, if we don't try, like, what can, what's going to happen? We know we'll fail if we don't try, but if we try, we think we can make a difference. And just one note on that, that as I mentioned, we don't do this ourselves. We're focused, we're the experts, we have the capability in investment management. We partner with people. We have dedicated people at Bridgeway who are focused on our giving back work, and then partner with people outside of Bridgeway through the Bridgeway Foundation. And they are some of the foremost experts on tackling these tough problems on the planet. And the CEO of Bridgeway Foundation wrote a whole book about some of the work that we've done in communities to end genocide and mass atrocities. So that's just another reference for you about that aspect of our vision. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I do want to be respectful of your time. I do want to ask one final question, because the Q&A is robust and there's a depth and breadth to all these questions. I am going to share with you these Q&A questions and give you and Tammy an opportunity to reflect on them and perhaps respond to some at a later point. I did just want to ask a question. As far as people, our audience, staying in touch with and remaining curious about conscious capitalism at Bridgeway, are there any resources or information channels, articles, books, etc., that our audience can be made aware of?
So first, I'll say thank you for all the questions. That is truly how we believe we can do better at what we're doing. And just thanks for this opportunity. And Tammy, I wanted to give you the chance, because she's one of my favorite question askers. She keeps me strong every day by asking tough questions and keeping me accountable. But do you want to share about what people can do to follow us?
Well, I definitely want to point out that Tammira is very active on LinkedIn, so you can follow Tammira and me on LinkedIn, and also Bridgeway. We also invite people to do like Tammira, join the Senior Leader Network. And then, of course, the Conscious Capitalism website has a wealth of information that I think we both found very helpful. And, I know Tammira references her book regularly. She just referenced it today. And so encourage you guys to just really stay curious. And for us, like Tammira said, we're always striving. That's what Bridgeway is about. And when we think about the foundation and how our stakeholders that are our clients can partner with us in investing, they actually contribute to what we're able to do through the foundation. So we're just, it's an ongoing circle. It's kind of how we look at research too. It's always continuing. And so when it comes to ESG or DEI, conscious capitalism, it's an ongoing thing. And Tammira's right. If you don't strive for it, you're never going to achieve it. So that's what I would add.
Yeah, I'm on Twitter too, by the way, any of you who prefer Twitter.
Yes. And Tammira, I know one thing I did want to say, were there any books that you've recently read or you've read in the past that you would recommend for folks?
Well, I would point people, I feel like the conscious capitalism community does a better job than I could ever do. But I literally pull out my original conscious capitalism book that I read at the beginning of my career at Bridgeway. I would say probably once a month, and a number of books that I'd be happy to keep recommending to people.
Well, I want to thank you both, Tammy and Tammira, for joining us today. For our attendees, we did add a link to a survey in the chat. If you just have 30 seconds, please take a moment to fill that out. It helps us consider future programming. And if you're an executive currently implementing conscious practices in your business, we invite you to our support system of like-minded leaders, our Senior Leader Network. That link was also added to the chat. But again, all participants, Tammy, Tammira, thank you so much for joining us today and for the robust and vibrant conversation with our community.
It was a lot of fun. Let's keep it going.